Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku unleashed Forbidden One for all. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sky over Jaka's city was not a sky anymore. It was a shroud of choking brown dust and suspended debris, a tomb lid closing over the world. Izuku Midoriya could taste the ruin. It coated his tongue, a grit composed of pulverized concrete, drywall, and the metallic, copper tang of blood. It wasn't just his blood. It was everywhere. The air vibrated, a low-frequency hum that rattled the marrow in his bones, emanating from the figure floating amidst the wreckage ahead, Tamura Shigaraki. Or what was left of him. Izuku's breathing was a ragged, wet sound scraping against his throat. His costume was shredded, the gamma suit's bracers cracked, the iron soles of his boots worn down to mere slivers. Every muscle fiber in his body screamed in a chorus of agony, a symphony of exhaustion that he had been ignoring for what felt like hours. Is that all? The voice didn't sound human. It was a discordant overlap of two tones, the raspy, petulant scratch of Shigaraki, overlaid with the smooth, baritone nightmare of All for One. Izuku forced his head up. His vision blurred, swimming with black spots. Beside him, Endeavor was on one knee, the flames on his shoulders flickering like dying candles. The number one hero was gasping, clutching his side where the high-end Nomu had struck him earlier. Further back, Ryukyu lay amidst the rubble, and Gran Torino. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut for a fraction of a second to banish the image of the old man's crushed form. Focus, Izuku told himself. The voice in his head sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. You have to focus. If you blink, everyone dies. If you stop, the world ends. Eraserhead. Izuku croaked out, turning his gaze toward the ridge where Shota Aizawa was fighting his own impossible battle. The teacher was the linchpin. The only reason they were still alive was that unblinking, bloodshot gaze keeping Shigaraki's decay and his myriad of stolen quirks at bay. Aizawa's hair was floating, defying gravity, but his leg was gone. Maimed. The sheer tenacity of the man was the only shield humanity had left. But shields break. The battlefield seemed to slow down. It was a cruel trick of adrenaline. Izuku saw the shift in the air before it happened. A stray Nomu, unnoticed in the chaos, lunged toward the ridge. Sensei! Izuku screamed, his legs firing up with the familiar green lightning of One for All full cowl. He moved, kicking off the air, but he was sluggish. 30%? 45? His body was failing to respond to the output. He was too slow. The attack didn't hit Aizawa directly. It hit the ground beneath him. The ridge collapsed. For a split second, Aizawa's line of sight broke. He blinked. That single blink was the death knell of Jaka City. The pressure returned instantly. It was as if gravity increased tenfold. Shigaraki laughed, a sound that tore through the dust clouds. The white hair of the villain whipped around as the quirks flooded back into his body. Super regeneration, air cannon, radio waves, and the terrible, bottomless hunger of All for One. Finally, Shigaraki sighed, the sound amplified by the air pressure. I can see clearly. Back tendrils burst from Shigaraki's spine, agonizingly sharp and moving with the speed of bullets. They lashed out, not at random, but with surgical precision. Midoriya, get back! Endeavor roared, forcing a surge of fire to intercept the tendrils, but the flames were batted aside like smoke. Izuku froze in midair, using Black Whip to anchor himself to a piece of floating debris. He watched, helpless, as the tide turned in a heartbeat. The radio comms in his ear exploded with screams. The evacuation team. The rear guard. Shigaraki wasn't just fighting them, he was fighting the ground itself. The decay began to spread again, turning the city blocks into gray sand. One for all, Shigaraki whispered. He turned his head, his eyes searching. The red irises glowed with a mixture of madness and calculation. Little brother. Come here. The demand bypassed Izuku's ears and struck his soul. The vestige world inside him violently shuddered. He felt the first user, Yoichi, recoil in terror. The connection was open. Shigaraki wasn't just looking at Izuku. He was looking into him. No, Izuku gasped. He tried to summon a smash, tried to raise his arm, but the sheer killing intent radiating from the villain paralyzed him. It was the same fear he had felt in the forest against Muscular, the same fear he felt against Overhaul, but magnified 1,000 times. This was the apex of villainy. Shigaraki raised a hand. His fingers didn't just threaten decay, they transformed. Rivet stab. The black and red tendrils shot forward, elongating, sharpening into spears designed to impale and drag. They were aimed squarely at Izuku's chest. Move! Izuku screamed at his legs. Move! But the exhaustion caught him. The split-second delay between thought and action. He watched the black spears approach, the tips glinting in the dull light. He calculated the trajectory. He knew he wouldn't dodge in time. He braced for the impact, for the theft of the quirk, for the end of his dream. Then, an explosion. It wasn't the sound of a quirk. It was the sound of a body hitting the air barrier at supersonic speeds. An orange and green blur cut across Izuku's vision. DKU, get out of the way, Katsuki Bakugo. There was no logic to it. Bakugo had always been the rational one in battle, the genius who prioritized victory. But his body had moved on its own, just like Izuku's had, all those years ago against the sludge villain. The sound of the impact was wet. Thudding. Final. Time stopped. Izuku's eyes widened until they felt like they would tear at the corners. The dust suspended in the air seemed to freeze. Bakugo hung in the air before him, arms spread wide. The rivet-stabbed tendrils, 4 of them, had punched completely through his torso. One through the shoulder. One through the stomach. One through the thigh. And one, the largest, right through the center of his chest, missing the heart by millimeters but shattering the sternum. Blood sprayed backward, hot and blinding, splashing across Izuku's face. Kaken? Izuku whispered. The word fell from his lips, devoid of breath. Bakugo coughed, a spray of crimson painting his chin. His eyes, usually sharp and filled with fire, went wide with shock. He looked down at the tendrils skewering him, then back at Izuku. He didn't look angry, he didn't look arrogant, he looked like a scared teenager. Stop trying to win this alone, Bakugo gargled, the blood bubbling in his throat. Shigaraki retracted the tendrils violently. Bakugo was yanked away, then discarded, flung aside like a broken toy. He hit the ground with a sickening bounce, rolling into the debris, and went still. How boring, Shigaraki muttered, wiping a speck of blood from his cheek. An unnecessary sacrifice. Flies swatting themselves. Izuku stared at the spot where Bakugo had landed. Something inside Izuku Midoriya broke. It wasn't a snap. It wasn't a crack. It was a shattering. Like a dam made of glass holding back an ocean of oil. For his entire life, Izuku had been driven by a singular emotion. Hope. The desire to save. The desire to be like All Might. Smile, and the world smiles with you. Even when he was angry, his anger was righteous. It was hot. It was protective. But this? This was not hot. The world turned cold. The ambient temperature in Jaka City dropped 20 degrees in a second. Frost began to creep over the rubble near Izuku's feet. He's dead. The thought wasn't a panic. It was a fact. A data point. Kaken is dead because I was too slow. Because I was too weak. Because I was trying to save a monster. Inside the mindscape of One for All, the sky turned from a twilight gold to a bruised, violently dark purple. The vestiges, Nana Shimura, Daigoro Banjo, the others, suddenly cried out in pain. They clutched their heads. Ninth! The first user's voice echoed, terrified. Ninth, stop! Don't open that door! Deep in the core of One for All, beneath the stockpiled power, beneath the quirks, there was something else. A locked room. A reservoir of memory. One for All was a quirk born from a desire to defeat All for One. For 9 generations, 8 users had poured their lives into it. But they hadn't just poured their strength. They had poured their trauma, their agony, their dying moments, Nana Shimura's despair at leaving her son, Daigoro's rage at being hunted, the second and third users' militant, bloody hatred for the tyrant who ruled their world. Izuku had always drawn from the light. Now, he reached into the dark. He reached for the door the second user had warned him never to touch. The door that held the collective rage of one for all. Open it, Izuku thought. No! The vestiges screamed. Open it! The seal shattered. Back in the real world, the green lightning surrounding Izuku vanished. Silence fell over the battlefield. Even Shigaraki paused, his enhanced senses screaming a warning he couldn't comprehend. The air pressure around Izuku reversed. Instead of blowing outward, everything was being sucked inward, towards the boy. The dust swirled into a vortex. The debris lifted, and then, the power erupted. It wasn't green. It wasn't the bright, hopeful teal of full cowl. It was crimson. A deep, jagged, blood-red energy that crackled with the sound of tearing metal. And within the red, there was a core of Vanta black, a darkness so absolute it seemed to eat the light around it. Izuku's hair stood on end, but it didn't float gently. It whipped violently, stained black by the aura. His skin began to crack, glowing red veins tracing up his neck and across his cheeks, mimicking the scars of one for all reaching its breaking point. The air around him screamed. It was a high-pitched, keen wail, like a tea kettle left on a fire until it melted. Midoriya? Endeavor pushed himself up, clutching his bleeding side. He looked at the boy and felt a chill of primal fear that he had never felt looking at All for One. Boy, what are you doing? Izuku didn't answer. He didn't look at Endeavor, he lowered his head. His eyes, usually wide and green, were hidden by the shadow of his hair. When he looked up, the green was gone. His pupils were blown wide, glowing with a luminescent, radioactive white light, rimmed in red. There were no whites of his eyes left. Just the void and the light. Shigaraki grinned, though it faltered slightly. So, you're finally getting serious? Good. Let's see what. Boom. There was no movement. There was no blur. Shigaraki simply ceased to be where he was standing. The villain was launched backward, crashing through 3 skyscrapers before he could even process the impact. The sound of the hit arrived a full second later, a thunderclap that shattered the windows of every surviving building in a 3-mile radius. Izuku stood where Shigaraki had been. His fist was extended. The smoke rising from his arm wasn't steam. It was his skin burning off from the friction of his own speed. He lowered his arm. The movement was jerky, mechanical. He turned his head toward the crater Shigaraki had made. Analysis, Izuku spoke. His voice was unrecognizable. It was devoid of inflection, stripped of the tremble that usually accompanied his fear. It was a flat, hollow sound. It sounded like a machine reading a death sentence. Target survival probability, 98%, Izuku murmured to himself, the forbidden power flooding his brain, rewriting his thought processes. The empathy, the hesitation, it was being burned away as fuel. In its place was cold, hard logic. Optimal efficiency. The forbidden one for all didn't care about saving. It didn't care about preserving the user's body. It was a weapon designed for one purpose, the annihilation of All for One. Izuku took a step. The ground beneath his foot disintegrated into powder, unable to bear the density of the energy radiating from him. Black tendrils exploded from his back, black whip. But they weren't the controlled, rope-like captures he used to save people. They were jagged, thrashing like panicked vipers, tipping with red energy. They lashed out at the debris, pulverizing rocks simply for being in the way. Deku! Uraraka's voice came over the comms, frantic, static-filled. We have Bakugo. He's barely breathing, but we have him. We're retreating. You need to fall back. Izuku reached up to his ear. He felt the plastic of the comms device. Retreat? The concept felt alien. Why would I retreat? The threat is still active. Midoriya! Endeavor shouted, limping toward him. We need to regroup. Shigaraki is recovering. Don't face him alone. Izuku looked at Endeavor. For a moment, the crimson aura flared, jagged spikes of energy lashing out. One tendril of black whip snapped near Endeavor's face, cracking the ground. Endeavor flinched, stopping in his tracks. He looked into Izuku's eyes and saw nothing. No recognition. No student. Just a biological weapon powered by a century of ghosts. You are in the way, Izuku said. He didn't shout it. He stated it as a fact. With a burst of pressure that flattened the ruins around him, Izuku vanished again, launching himself toward the dust cloud where Shigaraki lay. He moved with such violence that the shockwave knocked Endeavor off his feet. As Izuku tore through the air, the red lightning arcing off him disintegrated the falling rain before it could touch him. Inside the mindscape, the vestiges were screaming. The first user was pounding on the walls of the memory. But Izuku wasn't listening. He couldn't hear them anymore. He could only hear the curse. Kill him, the power whispered, a chorus of 8 dead voices twisted into hate. Break him. End it. Whatever the cost. Izuku Midoriya, the boy who wanted to save everyone, was gone. In his place was the 9th user, and he had finally accepted his inheritance. Not a gift. A curse. He collided with Shigaraki amidst the rubble, his fingers digging into the villain's face with enough force to crack the skull. Shigaraki screamed, a sound of genuine confusion and pain, as they plowed through the foundation of a hospital. The hero was gone. The monster had arrived. The sound of the impact did not echo. It simply deleted all other noise in Jaku City. Where the hospital ruins had once stood, there was now a crater, a vast, concave scar in the earth that smoked with the heat of atmospheric re-entry. At the center of the devastation, the air shimmered, distorted by a heat so intense it turned the falling rain into hissing pockets of steam before it could touch the ground. Tamura Shigaraki lay embedded in the bedrock. His body, enhanced by the greatest science the villains had to offer, and possessed by the greatest evil in history, was broken. His left arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. His chest cavity was caved in, the ribs knitting themselves back together with wet, sickening crunches as super regeneration fought a losing war against the damage. He gasped, choking on blood and dust. His red eyes darted frantically, searching. Fast, Shigaraki wheezed, the voice of all for one bleeding into his own. Too fast. There was no banter. There was no monologue about society or heroes. There was only the instinctual, lizard-brain terror of a predator realizing it was no longer at the top of the food chain. A shadow fell over him. It wasn't the shadow of a cloud. It was a shadow that radiated weight. Shigaraki looked up. Floating 10 feet above him, suspended by a quirk that no longer felt like Nana Shimura's gentle embrace, was Izuku Midoriya. But it wasn't him. The green sparks were gone. In their place was a dense, suffocating aura of crimson and Vanta black. It moved sluggishly, like crude oil underwater, dripping off his limbs. The black tendrils of Blackwhip writhed around him, not like ropes, but like the trembling legs of a spider, sharp and agitated. Izuku's face was a mask of absolute neutrality. The tears were gone. The panic was gone. His eyes, those glowing white voids ringed in blood red, stared down at Shigaraki not with hatred, but with the clinical indifference of a surgeon looking at a tumor. Regeneration rate calculated, Izuku's voice resonated. It sounded synthesized, buzzing with a harmonic distortion that grated against the ears. Tissue repair speed is decelerating. Conclusion: damage output must exceed cellular mitosis. Shigaraki scrambled backward, his heels digging into the dirt. Get away from me! He thrust his hand forward. Radio waves. A blast of EMP and kinetic force erupted, enough to fry the electronics of a battleship. Izuku did not dodge. He did not block. He simply moved through it. The crimson aura flared, eating the energy. Izuku descended. He didn't fly down. He simply removed the space between himself and his target. His boot connected with Shigaraki's knee. There was a snap, loud and dry like a gunshot. Shigaraki screamed. It was a raw, human sound. He tried to touch Izuku, to activate decay, but before his fingers could graze the boy's skin, a tendril of Blackwhip shot out. It didn't wrap around Shigaraki's wrist. It pierced it. The tendril drove through the palm of Shigaraki's hand, pinning it to the ground. Quirk activation detected, Izuku stated, staring at the impaled hand. Neutralized. The perspective of the damned. 50 meters away, Enji Todoroki, Endeavor, struggled to stand. The pain in his lung was agonizing, but it was nothing compared to the cold dread seizing his heart. He had spent his life chasing All Might. He knew what power looked like. He knew what strength looked like. All Might's power was a sun, bright, overwhelming, warm, and blinding. This was a black hole. Endeavor watched as the boy, his son's friend, the nervous intern, systematically dismantled the most dangerous villain in history. It wasn't a fight. A fight implied an exchange. This was a vivisection. Midoriya. Endeavor whispered, blood dripping from his chin. Stop. Beside him, Gran Torino lay amidst the rubble. The old hero's legs were crushed, but he was conscious. His eyes were wide, fixed on the crimson nightmare. It's happened, Gran Torino wheezed, tears mixing with the grit on his face. Tashinori, we failed him. The door. He opened the door. What door? Endeavor barked, though his voice lacked its usual authority. What is that power? The grudge, Gran Torino coughed. One for all isn't just power, NG. It's a will. It's the will of 8 people who died fighting that monster. It's 100 years of rage, sealed away because it was too volatile to control. The boy has broken the seal. They watched as Izuku grabbed Shigaraki by the face. There was no hesitation. No morality check. Izuku slammed the villain's head into the ground, dragged him through the bedrock, and threw him upward. As Shigaraki floated helplessly at the apex of the throw, Izuku appeared above him instantly. He clasped his hands together. Not a smash. A hammer blow. The air pressure dropped. Impact, Izuku murmured. He swung. The shockwave flattened the ruins of Jaka's city for another 200 meters. Inside the void, the mindscape of One for All was usually a place of abstract thought, a void of stars and mist. Now it was a storm. The ocean beneath the vestiges had turned to blood. The sky was a swirling vortex of black clouds, crackling with red lightning. Yoichi Shigaraki, the first user, stood on his knees, clutching his chest. He felt like he was burning alive. Every blow Izuku landed in the real world sent a backlash of pure, unadulterated fury through the vestige realm. He can't hear us! Nana Shimura screamed, her form flickering. She was weeping. Izuku! Please! You're killing him! You're killing yourself! The second user, the leader of the resistance from the dawn of quirks, stood with his back to them, watching the storm. His arms were crossed, his face grim. He is doing what is necessary, the second user said, though his voice trembled. Necessary? The fifth user, Banjo, roared. Look at him! He's burning his own memories as fuel. He's bypassing the body's limiters by shutting down his humanity. If he keeps this up, he won't come back. He'll be a shell. He is winning, the second countered sharply. For the first time in a century, we are undeniably winning. The boy has tapped into our hatred. My hatred. Your hatred. It is the only thing strong enough to kill All for One. At the cost of his soul? Yoichi cried out. I didn't give him this power to turn him into a monster. I gave it to him because he had a hero's heart. If he loses that, then All for One has already won. The vestiges watched the screen of the real world. They saw through Izuku's eyes, but the vision was strange. It was overlaid with data. Trajectory lines. Weak points highlighted in red. It was a vision devoid of color, warmth, or life. It was a vision of targets and obstacles. They watched as Izuku prepared to deliver a killing blow to a defenseless Shigaraki. The logic of ruin. In the physical world, Izuku felt nothing. Pain was a signal he had muted. Fatigue was a variable he had edited out of the equation. His right arm was shattered. The bones in his forearm were pulverized from the force of his last 100% output. The skin was blackened and charred. The Forbidden One for All simply commandeered Black Whip to wrap around the arm, acting as an external exoskeleton and muscle structure, forcing the broken limb to continue functioning. Target, Shigaraki Tamura. Status, critical. Recommendation, termination. The voice in his head, the composite consciousness of the curse, was soothing. It told him that emotions were heavy. Sadness was heavy. Fear was heavy. If he let them go, he could fly higher. He could hit harder. He stood over Shigaraki, who was now a convulsing heap of regenerating flesh. The villain was trying to crawl away, missing half a leg and an arm. Why? Shigaraki gurgled, his eyes swollen shut. Why aren't you saving me? You heroes always save. Izuku tilted his head. The white light of his eyes narrowed. Saving is inefficient, Izuku said. Elimination of the threat ensures the safety of the majority. You are the threat. He raised his foot. The sole of his iron boot hovered over Shigaraki's skull. The crimson aura concentrated around his leg. The air began to ignite. This was it. The final stomp. A blow meant to crush the brain faster than it could regenerate. Master! Shigaraki screamed, his voice reverting to the terrified child, Tenko Shimura. Master, save me! It wasn't all for one who answered. From the dust clouds, shapes emerged. High-end nomes. The near high-ends that had been kept in reserve. 5 of them. Intelligent, fast, and incredibly strong. They had ignored the other heroes and rushed to their master's aid. A Nomu with elongated, blade-like limbs lunged at Izuku from the blind spot, aiming for his neck. Izuku didn't turn. A tendril of black whip exploded from his back. It moved faster than sound. It didn't wrap the Noma. It pierced the creature's brain, entering through the eye socket and exiting the back of the skull. With a flick of his mind, Izuku detonated the energy inside the tendril. The Noma's head exploded in a shower of gray matter. Obstacles detected, Izuku thought. Number 4. He lowered his foot, stepping away from Shigaraki. Not to spare him, but to clear the board. Izuku vanished. He appeared in front of the second Noma, a hulking beast with 4 arms. The creature swung. Izuku ducked under the blow, the movement fluid and devoid of wasted energy. He placed his hand on the Noma's chest. Fa gene. 100%. Kinetic release. Begone. The blast was silent for a split second, then the sound caught up. The Noma's torso was obliterated. A hole the size of a beach ball appeared where its heart had been. The creature crumpled. The remaining 3 Nomas hesitated. These were creatures bred for war, creatures that felt no fear. Yet they hesitated. Their survival instincts, buried deep beneath the genetic tampering, were screaming, "Protect! Master!" One groaned, grabbing the broken body of Shigaraki and leaping away. Izuku pivoted. His eyes locked onto the fleeing Noma. Target escaping. Probability of interception, 40%. He crouched to launch himself. Midoriya! Watch out, Ryukyu. The Dragoon hero. She had recovered enough to transform, lunging forward to intercept a stray blast of decay that Shigaraki had released in his panic. She landed between Izuku and the fleeing villain. To the old Izuku, this would have been an ally. A friend. Someone to check on. To the 9th user, currently drowning in the curse, she was something else. Obstacle. Izuku's target lock didn't distinguish. The crimson aura flared. The black tendrils lashed out, perceiving the large dragon form as a barrier to his objective. Move, Izuku hissed. A massive black whip tendril, thick as a tree trunk and spiked like a torture device, slammed into Ryukyu's side. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a strike. Ryukyu gasped as her ribs cracked. The force of the blow sent the massive dragon tumbling sideways, crashing into a pile of debris. She reverted to her human form, coughing up blood, looking at Izuku with utter betrayal and confusion. Midoriya? She whimpered. The sound of her voice seemed to strike an invisible wall in Izuku's mind. He froze. The Noma carrying Shigaraki disappeared into the thick smoke, escaping the perimeter. The target was gone. Izuku stood alone in the center of the clearing. His arm was extended, the black whip that had struck Ryukyu slowly retracting, dripping with the red energy. He looked at his hand. He looked at Ryukyu. The logical overlay in his vision flickered. Target Ryukyu. Status ally. Damage sustained. Source self. I. Izuku's voice cracked. The synthesized distortion faded for a second, revealing the terrified boy underneath. I hit her? He stumbled back. The crimson aura pulsed erratically, changing from the jagged spikes to a chaotic, swirling mist. He clutched his head with his good hand. Get out of my head! He screamed. The sound tore his throat. Endeavor limped forward, his hand raised in a placating gesture. Midoriya. It's over. Shigaraki is gone. Power down. That's an order. Izuku whipped his head around. The curse surged back. The logic returned. Threat assessment high. Energy levels critical. Environment hostile. Endeavor wasn't a teacher. He was a heat source. He was a potential combatant. Stay back, Izuku growled. The black darkness swallowed the whites of his eyes again. The aura flared, cracking the ground beneath him. Deku? A new voice. Small. Weak. Katsuki Bakugo. Against all medical probability, Bakugo had dragged himself out of the rubble. He was bleeding from 4 stab wounds. He was pale as a sheet. He looked like a corpse standing upright. He leaned against a broken slab of concrete, staring at Izuku. Bakugo rasped. Nerd. Look at me. Izuku turned. The sight of Bakugo, impaled, bleeding, dying, was the catalyst that had started this. Seeing him now, alive but broken, sent a shockwave through Izuku's psyche that the curse couldn't fully suppress. But the interpretation was wrong. Weakness, the curse whispered. Attachment causes pain. Attachment causes failure. Look at him. He is broken because of you. If you stay, you will break the rest of them. Izuku's breathing hyperventilated. The air around him grew so heavy that Bakugo's knees buckled. I can't. Izuku backed away. He looked at his hands, stained with blood, some of it Shigaraki's, some of it his own, some of it undoubtedly from the bystanders his aura had grazed. Midoriya, listen to us. Aizawa's voice came over the comms, weak but stern. Do not move. We can help you. You can help me, Izuku whispered. The realization was cold and absolute. I am not a hero anymore. He looked at Ryukyu, gasping for air. He looked at Endeavor, burned and weary. He looked at Bakugo, holding his chest. I am a weapon. I have to go, Izuku said. DKU, don't you dare! Bakugo screamed, trying to take a step, but falling to his knees. Don't you run away from me! Izuku didn't look back. He crouched. The crimson energy gathered around him, dense and volatile. For the safety of the population, Izuku recited, a single tear cutting through the grime on his face, evaporating instantly in the heat of his aura. I must be isolated. Boom! He launched himself. It wasn't a jump. It was an explosion. The ground where he stood vaporized. Izuku shot into the sky, tearing through the cloud layer in seconds. A trail of black and red smoke marked his ascent, like a reverse meteor. He didn't head toward UA. He didn't head toward the evacuation centers. He turned north, toward the mountains. Toward the emptiness. Below him, the heroes of Japan watched the 9th user of One for All vanish into the storm, leaving nothing but destruction and silence in his wake. The breaking point had passed. The calamity had begun. Gravity was the only thing that felt real. Izuku Midoriya fell. He didn't know for how long. The concept of time had shattered somewhere between Jaka's city and the cloud layer. He was a comet of exhausted flesh and dying momentum, streaking across the night sky of a prefecture he couldn't name. The crimson energy, the curse, sputtered. It was an engine running on empty, coughing out the last dregs of its volatile fuel. The Vanta black tendrils that had been holding his broken body together began to dissolve, retreating back into the marrow of his bones. With the retreat of the power came the return of sensation. Pain didn't just return, it crashed into him like a tidal wave. Ah! The sound escaped his lips, weak and wet. He clipped the top of a pine tree. The wood shattered with a crack that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet wilderness. Then another branch. Then a trunk. He tumbled, a ragdoll of unparalleled durability, smashing through the canopy of a dense, uncharted forest. He hit the earth. It wasn't a graceful landing. He plowed a trench through the soil, snapping roots and churning up mud, before coming to a halt against a massive, moss-covered boulder. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. The rain had stopped here. The only sound was the hissing of steam rising from his costume. The gamma suit was destroyed. The iron soles were warped slag. The bracers were shrapnel embedded in his forearms. Izuku lay on his back, staring up at the gaps in the trees where the stars should have been. But his vision was gray. His lungs rattled, fighting to pull in oxygen that tasted of pine needles and ozone. Status report, his mind pleaded, instinctively reaching for the cold, logical voice that had guided him through the battle. Give me a status report. But the voice was gone. The cold, calculating god that had looked at Shigaraki and saw only data had retreated into the dark. Izuku was just a boy again. A broken, 16-year-old boy. Mom! He whispered. His eyes rolled back into his head. The darkness swallowed him, but it didn't bring sleep. It brought him somewhere else, the red ocean. Usually, when Izuku entered the mindscape of One for All, it was a sensation of floating. It was a void of infinite, comforting darkness, populated by the colorful lights of the previous users. It was quiet. It was holy. Not anymore. Izuku woke up choking. He wasn't floating. He was drowning. He thrashed, his hands clawing at a thick, viscous liquid. It wasn't water. It was warm. It tasted of copper and rust. It was blood. He broke the surface, gasping for air, coughing up the red fluid. Where? He looked around, and terror seized his heart. The infinite void was gone. In its place was a violently turbulent ocean of blood, stretching out to a horizon that bled into a sky of bruised purple and charcoal black. Thunder rumbled, but it didn't sound like weather. It sounded like artillery fire. It sounded like screams. Jagged rocks of black obsidian jutted out of the Red Sea, sharp and hostile. Get up, Ninth. The voice was harsh. Commanding. Izuku paddled toward the nearest black rock and dragged himself up. His astral body felt heavy, weighed down by the same exhaustion as his physical form. He collapsed onto the stone, shivering. He looked up. The vestiges were there. But they were not the noble spirits he remembered. Nana Shimura was on her knees near the edge of the rock, her face buried in her hands, weeping silently. Her cape was tattered, stained with the same black corruption that had coated Izuku. Daigoro Banjo, the fifth user, stood with his back to a stone pillar, his arms crossed, his usually energetic face pale and drawn. He wouldn't look at Izuku. The first user, Yoichi, stood in the center. He looked smaller than usual. Frail. He looked at Izuku with eyes full of infinite sorrow. But the voice hadn't come from them. It came from the two figures standing atop the highest point of the rock formation. The two who had always faced the wall. The two who had only recently acknowledged Izuku, the second user. And the third. The second user, Kudo, stared down at Izuku. His face, usually obscured by shadows, was visible now. He had a scar running down his left cheek. His eyes were hard, flinty, like a soldier who had seen too much war to believe in peace. You opened the door, Kudo said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of grim fact. Izuku stammered, wiping the blood water from his mouth. I didn't mean to. Kaken, he was dead, the third user finished. Or close enough to it. You saw your friend impaled. You felt the fear. And in that moment, you rejected saving. You chose winning. I had to. Izuku cried out, the memory of Bakugo's body flashing in his mind. Shigaraki was going to kill everyone. I couldn't move. I was too weak. So you reached for the reserve, Kudo said, stepping down from the perch. He walked toward Izuku. The red ocean waves crashed against the rock, spraying them. You reached for the thing we told you to leave alone. What is this place? Izuku asked, his voice trembling. Why does One for All look like this? Yoichi stepped forward. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. His touch was cold. This is the true heart of One for All, Izuku, Yoichi whispered. Or at least, the part of it we tried to hide from you. Yoichi gestured to the ocean of blood. You think One for All is a power of justice? Of hope? Yoichi shook his head sadly. No. Those are things we added to it. We tried to layer hope on top of it. But at its core, at its very seed, this power was born from one thing. Yoichi pointed at his own chest. My hatred for my brother. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. All for One gave me this power, Yoichi continued. He forced it upon me. And I hated him. I loved him, yes, but I hated him more. I hated his cruelty. I hated his tyranny. When I passed the power to the second, Yoichi looked at Kudo. Kudo nodded. I didn't take this power to become a symbol of peace, boy. I took it to kill the man who murdered my friends. I took it to wage war, and I took it to survive, the third added. And I took it because I had no choice, the fourth, Heike Shinomori, whispered from the shadows. Do you understand? Kudo loomed over Izuku. One for All is a stockpile. It stockpiles power. It stockpiles quirks. But it also stockpiles emotion. For 100 years, 8 people have poured their fear, their pain, and their burning, absolute rage against all for one into this core. Kudo stomped his foot on the black rock. This ocean? This isn't blood. This is wrath. It is a century of screaming. We sealed it away. We locked it behind the door of the symbol of peace because it is too volatile. It consumes the user. It turns you into a weapon. Izuku looked at his hands. In the mindscape, they were stained black. I felt it, Izuku whispered. It felt quiet. It felt like I didn't have to care anymore. That is the seduction of the forbidden act, Nana Shimura spoke up. Her voice was thick with tears. She lifted her head. To save someone requires empathy. It requires you to feel their pain. That is heavy, that is hard. But to destroy? To simply kill? That is easy. The curse takes away your empathy so you can be efficient. It protects your heart by freezing it, but at a cost, Banjo rumbled. Izuku looked around the circle. What cost? The vestiges went silent. They looked at each other, an uncomfortable, guilty exchange. Ninth, Kudo said softly. You accessed 100% of the power without a body capable of holding it. You bypassed the biological limiters. You generated energy out of nothing. Where do you think that energy came from? Izuku felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. My bones. Bones heal, the third scoffed. This power doesn't eat bones. It eats self. Yoichi squeezed Izuku's shoulder. To bridge the gap between your 45% and the 100% you used, the curse burned your memories as fuel. Izuku blinked. Memories? The curse consumes the things that make you human, Yoichi explained gently. It consumes the emotional connections that hold you back from being a pure killing machine. To protect you from the trauma of killing Shigaraki, it ate the memories that would make you hesitate. Izuku scrambled backward, slipping on the wet rock. No, that's not. I remember everything. I remember the fight. I remember Kaken. I remember Yue. Do you? Nana asked. She walked over, kneeling in front of him. She looked like a ghost of the woman she was. Izuku, honey, think of your home. I can, Izuku said quickly, his heart hammering. I live in Mustafu. The apartment near the station. Think of your mother, Nana whispered. Mom. Inko Midoriya, Izuku said, the words tumbling out fast. She has green hair. She worries a lot. She makes katsudon. What does her voice sound like? Izuku opened his mouth to answer. Izuku. Dinner is ready. Izuku, be careful. Izuku, you are my hero. He tried to summon the audio file in his brain. He tried to hear the pitch, the tone, the specific wobble she got when she was anxious. Silence. He could see her face. He could remember the facts about her. He knew she loved him, but the sound, it was like a corrupted video file. The audio track was missing. Izuku's eyes widened. He grabbed his head. Wait, I just heard it this morning. Before I left. Try to remember how it felt when she hugged you, Nana pressed, tears streaming down her face. Not the fact that she hugged you. The feeling. Izuku reached into his heart. He reached for the warmth. He found cold ash. He remembered the hug as a data point. Mother hugged me. Pressure applied to torso. Duration 5 seconds. The emotion was gone. The warmth was gone. No, Izuku gasped. He clawed at his chest. No. Give it back. Give it back to me. He screamed at the red ocean. He screamed at the storm. I don't want this power. Izuku wailed, curling into a ball. Take it back. I don't want to forget her. She's all I have. Kudo looked down at the weeping boy with a mixture of pity and steely resolve. You cannot give it back, Kudo said. The seal is broken. The rage is leaking out. You are the 9th. You are the culmination of our power, and now, you are the carrier of our curse. You have a choice, Izuku, Yoichi said softly. You can return to Yue. You can try to be a hero. But the curse is awake now. If you get angry, if you get scared, if you see your friends in danger again, it will take over. And next time, it might not stop with Shigaraki. It might look at your friends and see obstacles to be removed. Izuku froze. He remembered looking at Ryukyu. He remembered the black tendrils striking her. He remembered the logic, obstacle. If he went back, if he stood next to Uraraka, or Ida, or Ochako, if a villain attacked them, and he snapped again, he wouldn't just forget his mother. He might kill them. The realization settled over him like a funeral shroud. The weeping stopped. The panic faded, replaced by a hollow, icy resolve. Izuku stood up. He looked at the vestiges. He looked at the red ocean. I can't go back, he whispered. No, Kudo agreed. You cannot. I have to finish this, Izuku said. His voice sounded older. I have to kill all for one. And I have to do it alone. If you do it alone, Nana warned, the curse will eat you alive. By the end of it, you won't remember who you saved. Izuku looked at his hands. That doesn't matter, he said. As long as they are safe. As long as they are alive. It doesn't matter if I remember them. He looked up at the dark sky of his mind. I accept the terms. The awakening. Izuku opened his eyes. Real rain was falling on his face now. A soft drizzle, filtering through the broken pine branches. It was dawn. The sky was a pale, sickly gray. Pain. Every nerve ending was firing. His right arm was numb, a bad sign. His left leg throbbed with a deep, bone-bruising ache. He sat up. His spine cracked audibly. He was in a forest. The smell of pine and wet earth was overwhelming. It was peaceful, too peaceful. Izuku reached into his pocket. His phone was there. It was cracked, the screen a spiderweb of fractures, but it was still working. It was vibrating. 34 missed calls, 15 voicemails. He tapped the screen. The light stung his eyes. Missed call, Ochako Uraraka 12. Missed call, Tenya Ida 8. Missed call, Shoto Todoroki 5. Missed call, Kaken 1. He stared at the name Kaken. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the callback button. If he called them, they would come. They would find him. They would drag him back to the dorms. They would put him in a bed. They would try to heal him, and then all for one would come. And Shigaraki would come. And the war would come to the doorstep of the school, and Izuku would have to fight. And he would lose control. And he would hurt them. I can't hear Mom's voice, he thought. The thought was a dull ache in his chest. If I go back, I'll lose the rest of her. I'll lose the memory of Ochako's smile. I'll lose the memory of Ida's laugh. He couldn't risk them. He couldn't risk himself. Izuku scrolled to the voicemail from Uraraka. He pressed play. Deku? Deku, please pick up. We're at the hospital. Bakugo is in surgery. He's going to make it. He's going to be okay. Please, where are you? Everyone is scared. Just come home. We can fix this. Whatever happened, we can fix it together. Please, Izuku. Her voice cracked at the end. Izuku listened to it. He listened to the sound of her crying. He tried to memorize the pitch. He tried to lock it away in a part of his brain the curse couldn't reach. I'm sorry, Uraraka-san, he croaked. His voice was raspy, ruined by the screaming and the smoke. He didn't delete the message. He couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he placed the phone on the flat surface of the mossy rock he had crashed against. He looked at it for a long moment. Then, he raised his fist. Green sparks flickered, weak, sputtering. But then, a jagged streak of crimson lightning arc around his wrist. Crunch. He brought his fist down. The phone shattered. The glass turned to dust. The metal bent. The connection to UA, to his friends, to his life as a student, was severed. Izuku stood up. He swayed, grabbing a tree branch for support. He looked down at his costume. The Zeta suit was in tatters. The yellow cape was torn in half. He ripped the remaining piece of the cape off his shoulders. It was just a rag now. He wrapped the yellow cloth around his neck, pulling it up like a scarf. Like Gran Torino. Like a wanderer. He looked at his arms. The compression bands were fused to his skin in places. He couldn't take them off. They were part of him now. Support gear for a body that was slowly breaking apart. One for all, Izuku whispered to the empty forest. He felt the power stir. It felt different now. It wasn't a torch being passed. It was a furnace. A hungry, roaring furnace that demanded coal. Let's go. He didn't know who he was talking to. The vestiges? The curse? Himself? It didn't matter. Izuku Midoriya turned his back on the direction of the city. He turned his back on the rising sun. He walked into the shadows of the deep woods. He walked with a limp, but his pace was steady. The hero Deku had died in the ruins of Jaku City. The ghost that walked out of the forest was something else entirely. He was the ninth. He was the vessel, and he had a job to do, 200 miles away, in a high-security prison facility that was already compromised. Lady Nagant sat in her cell. She was polishing the elbow of her rifle arm, a habit she couldn't break. Suddenly she stopped. She looked up at the ceiling. A shiver ran down her spine. It was a sensation she hadn't felt in years. Not since she was a Public Safety Commission hero hunting down the worst of the worst. It was the feeling of being hunted. What was that? She whispered to the silence. Her cell door buzzed. The electronic lock disengaged. The systems were failing. The breakout had begun. All for One's voice crackled over the intercom, offering freedom to those who would serve him. Nagant stood up. She walked to the door, but the feeling didn't leave her. The air felt colder. Somewhere out there, a beast had been let off its leash. And for the first time in a long time, Kane Tsutsumi felt a flicker of genuine fear. Rain had become the permanent state of existence. For 2 weeks, a relentless, slate-gray deluge had hammered the Kanto region, as if the heavens were trying to wash away the scars carved into the earth by the Paranormal Liberation War. The water didn't cleanse, it merely turned the dust of ruined cities into a thick, choking sludge. Society hadn't just cracked, it had shattered. The trust in heroes, the bedrock of superhuman society for generations, had dissolved overnight. The prisons were empty. Tartarus was a smoking crater. The streets belonged to the wolves. But among the wolves, a new story was being whispered. It wasn't spoken of on the news broadcasts, which were too busy tallying the death tolls or tracking the movements of Shigaraki and All for One. It was spoken of in the shadows, huddled around trash fires and alleyways, muttered by looters and escaped convicts with trembling lips. They didn't call him a hero. They didn't call him a vigilante. They called him the Red Ghost. Scene 1: The Prey. The warehouse district in Yokohama was supposed to be safe territory for the Gearless Gang, a group of mid-tier thugs who had escaped a detention center during the chaos. They were looting a supply depot, food, batteries, medical supplies. "Hurry it up!" barked Kenta, a man with jagged rock protrusions covering his shoulders. "The pros might be spread thin, but Endeavor is still prowling." "Endeavor is busy in Tokyo," grinned a spindly villain named Jiro, his fingers elongated into lock-picking tools. "We own the night, boss. There's nobody left to stop us. The heroes are scared. They're hiding in their schools." Thunder rolled overhead, low and guttural, shaking the corrugated metal roof of the warehouse. The lights flickered. Then they went out. "Cut the crap, Jiro," Kenta snapped, igniting a small flame in his palm. "Did you trip a breaker?" "I didn't touch anything." Jiro's voice trembled. The power just died. The darkness in the warehouse was absolute, save for the weak orange glow of Kenta's hand. The rain drummed against the roof, a deafening white noise that masked footsteps. Thud. It came from the catwalks above. A heavy, wet sound. Like a sack of meat hitting steel. "Who's there?" Kenta roared, throwing a fireball toward the ceiling. The fire illuminated the rafters for a split second. There was nothing there. Just rust and shadows. "Boss!" came a whimper from the back of the group. "Where's Taka?" Kenta spun around. There had been 5 of them a moment ago. Now there were 4. Taka, the muscle of the group, was gone. There was no sign of a struggle. No scream. Just an empty space where a man had stood. "Form up!" Kenta screamed, backing against the crate. "Back to back! It's a pro! It has to be!" They huddled together, eyes darting frantically into the void. Their quirks were active, spikes, lasers, hardening. They were ready for a fight. But a fight required an opponent you could see. The temperature dropped. It wasn't a gradual cooling. It was instant. Their breath began to mist in the air. Frost crystallized on the metal crates next to them. The humidity in the air froze, snapping with sharp, biting sounds. "Why is it cold?" Jiro wept. "Why is it so cold?" From the darkness, two eyes opened. They weren't eyes. They were twin pinpricks of radioactive white light, ringed in a bleeding, jagged crimson. They floated in the dark, 7 feet off the ground, unblinking. A low, vibrating hum filled the air. It was the sound of power so dense it was ionizing the atmosphere. Found you, a voice said. It was a voice devoid of intonation. It didn't sound angry. It didn't sound righteous. It sounded like a train schedule being read over an intercom. Die! Kenta screamed. He unleashed a torrent of rocks and fire toward the eyes. The attack hit nothing. The eyes vanished. Crack! The sound of a bone snapping echoed through the warehouse. Jiro screamed, then was silenced instantly. Kenta spun around to see Jiro flying backward, crashing into a stack of pallets with enough force to splinter the wood. He didn't move. Show yourself! Kenta shrieked, panic overriding his training. A bolt of black lightning, no, a tendril, shot out of the shadows. It moved with the speed of a whip crack. It wrapped around the ankle of the villain to Kenta's left. The man didn't even have time to yell. He was yanked into the darkness. There was a wet impact against the wall, then silence. Kenta was alone. He hyperventilated, the flame in his hand sputtering. He backed away, his boots slipping on the wet concrete. Please, he begged the darkness. I'll go back. I'll turn myself in. The footsteps started. Clank. 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 Heavy. Metallic. Slow. From the gloom, the figure emerged. He was wrapped in tatters. A yellow, frayed cloth, what used to be a cape, was wound around his neck like a scarf, hiding the lower half of his face. His costume was a ruin of dark green and black, covered in mud and dried blood. His arms were encased in black support bracers that looked fused to his skin, but it was the aura that broke Kenta's mind. Jagged bolts of black and red electricity arced off the boy's body, disintegrating the raindrops before they could touch him. Surrender is irrelevant, the phantom said. Kenta stared into those hollow, glowing eyes. He saw no mercy. He saw no plus ultra. What are you? Kenta whispered. The boy tilted his head. A spark of crimson energy leaped from his eye. I am the consequence. Kenta tried to fire one last rock. The boy moved. He didn't run. He simply occupied the space in front of Kenta instantly. A fist, wreathed in black smoke and red lightning, buried itself in Kenta's stomach. Kenta didn't fly back. The force was so concentrated, so perfectly directed, that he simply crumpled around the fist. The air left his lungs. His consciousness vanished before his knees hit the floor. Izuku Midoriya stood over the unconscious bodies. Threats neutralized, the voice in his head, the curse, stated. Time elapsed, 42 seconds. Inefficiency detected. Should have been 30. Izuku looked at his hand. It was trembling. Not from fear, but from the strain of holding back. The curse wanted to kill them. It whispered that dead villains couldn't escape again. It whispered that a permanent solution was the only solution. No, Izuku thought, though the thought felt distant, like he was shouting it from underwater. Not dead. Just stopped. He turned and walked away, fading back into the rain. He didn't wait for the police. He didn't wait to be thanked. He had a list. And there were still names on it. Scene 2, the empty chair. The common room of the Heights Alliance dorms at UA High was warm, but it felt like a mausoleum. The TV was on, playing a loop of emergency broadcasts and weather reports on mute. The students of Class 1A sat in various states of disarray. Some were studying, though their eyes weren't moving across the pages. Some were cleaning their gear, the repetitive motion a balm for their anxiety. Ochako Uraraka sat on the sofa, her knees pulled to her chest. In her hand she held a crumpled piece of paper. I'm sorry. I have to do this alone. She had read the note 1,000 times. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. It wasn't the handwriting of the boy who took meticulous notes on hero analysis. It was the handwriting of someone running out of time. Any news? The voice came from the doorway. Shoto Todoroki stood there. He looked exhausted. The burn scar on his face seemed more prominent against his pale skin. He had been spending every waking hour with his father, trying to track down the League. Ochako shook her head slowly. No. Nothing from the GPS. He destroyed his phone. Tenya Ida, sitting at the table with his arm in a sling, adjusted his glasses. The light caught the lenses, hiding his eyes. The reports from the police are disturbing. Disturbing how? Asked Eijiro Kurishima. The redhead was usually the bastion of optimism, but his hair was down, unstyled, and his eyes were red-rimmed. They're finding villains, Ida said softly. Large groups of them. Incapacitated. But the injuries, they aren't consistent with capture techniques. Shattered femurs. Collapsed lungs. Concussions so severe the villains may never wake up. It's him, Shoto said flatly. We don't know that. Mina Ashido cried out, her voice cracking. Midoriya wouldn't. He doesn't hurt people like that. He saves them. He's the nicest guy we know. He was, a gruff voice rasped. Everyone turned. Katsuki Bakugo stood at the bottom of the stairs. He was leaning heavily on a crutch. His chest was wrapped in thick bandages visible under his loose t-shirt. He looked gaunt. The fire that usually defined his presence was dimmed, replaced by a simmering, dark coal. Bakugo, Kurishima started, standing up. You shouldn't be walking. Shut up, shitty hair, Bakugo growled, limping into the room. He collapsed onto an armchair, wincing as his stitched-up chest pulled tight. He stared at the floor. The nerd isn't gone, Bakugo muttered. He's buried. I saw it. In Jaka. The room went silent. Bakugo hadn't spoken about the battle since he woke up from surgery 3 days ago. Saw what? Ochako whispered. Bakugo gripped the armrest of the chair until the fabric creaked. I saw his eyes. When I got hit. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Shigaraki. He looked through everything. It wasn't Deku. It was something ancient. Something pissed off. The ninth curse, Tokoyami murmured from the corner, dark shadow hovering protectively around his neck. A darkness born of light. He thinks he's protecting us, Bakugo spat. That idiot. He thinks if he goes out there and breaks himself, we'll be safe. He thinks he's All Might. But All Might is here, Momo Yayorosa said gently. And All Might is... She trailed off. They all knew. All Might hadn't been seen in the dorms for a week. He was haunting the teacher's lounge, a ghost of his former self, staring at maps and making phone calls that no one answered. We have to find him, Ochako said, standing up. Her fists were clenched. We can't just sit here while he destroys himself. If he's hurting people, if he's hurting himself, we have to stop him. How? Shoto asked. He has danger sense. He has smokescreen. He's faster than us. Stronger than us. And if what Bakugo says is true, he might not want to be found. I don't care what he wants, Ochako said, tears finally spilling over. I care what he needs. And he needs us. Bakugo looked up. For the first time, there was no malice in his expression. Only a mirrored, desperate need. Then get your gear, Bakugo rasped. We're going hunting. Scene 3, The Hollow Man. Tashinori Yagi sat in the darkened office of the UA principal. Niza was busy coordinating with the remnants of the Public Safety Commission, leaving the former number 1 hero alone with his demons. On the desk in front of him was a tablet. It displayed a grainy security camera image from a convenience store in Saitama. The timestamp was from 4 hours ago. The image showed a figure standing in the rain, looking through the glass at the food aisle. The figure was hunched, feral. The eyes were glowing white circles. Tashinori traced the screen with a skeletal finger. Young Midoriya, he whispered. The name tasted like ash. He closed his eyes and tried to reach out. He tried to feel the connection to One for All, the bond that had always been there, a warm hum in the back of his soul. Silence. It wasn't that the connection was gone. It was that he had been locked out. The door had been slammed in his face. You're angry, Tashinori said to the empty room. You're angry at me. And you should be. Ring. Ring. The phone on the desk jolted him. He picked it up. Yagi here. It's Tsukachi. The detective's voice was tight, professional but strained. We have a situation. Did you find him? Tashinori asked, sitting up, his heart hammering against his ribs. In a manner of speaking, Tsukachi sighed. We got a ping on a clerk's signature matching the database for One for All. But... Tashinori, the location. It's bad. Where? Hibara sector. The abandoned industrial zone. Intelligence suggests that's where Muscular, go to a Masuji, has been holding up since the breakout. Toshinori's blood ran cold. Muscular. The man who had nearly killed Izuku at the summer camp. The man who represented pure, unadulterated violence. I'm coming, Toshinori said, already moving. Wait, All Might. Endeavor is already en route. You don't have a quirk. It's too dangerous. He is my student. Toshinori roared, a flash of the old strength entering his voice. He is my son in every way that matters. If he is fighting that monster alone, I will not sit here and wait for the report. He slammed the phone down. He grabbed his coat. Please, Toshinori prayed as he ran toward the car. Please let there be something left of him to save. Scene 4, the rematch. The rain in the Hybera sector was black with soot. The ruins of the old factories loomed like skeletons against the night sky. Izuku stood in the center of a muddy courtyard. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't using smokescreen. He was broadcasting his presence, a beacon of raw power. The ground beneath his feet vibrated. I know that smell, the voice boomed from the top of a rusted silo. A massive figure leaped down, landing with a crash that shook the foundations of the nearby buildings. Go to a Masuji. Muscular. He was bigger than before. His muscle fibers were uncontrolled, bulging and writhing beneath his skin like snakes. His artificial eye whirred, zooming in on the small, tattered figure in front of him. Midoriya! Muscular laughed, spreading his arms. I was hoping you'd come. I saw the news. They say you've gone rogue. They say you're finally fun. Izuku didn't move. The yellow cape flapped wetly in the wind. Surrender, Izuku said. His voice was barely a whisper, yet it cut through the rain. Surrender? Muscular grinned, his teeth sharp. Don't be boring. I want to see it. Show me. Show me the power that broke Shigaraki. Muscular lunged. It was a blur of speed and meat. He closed the distance in a fraction of a second, his fist the size of a wrecking ball, aiming to turn Izuku into paste. Threat detected, the curse whispered. Kinetic force, extreme. Evasion recommended. No, Izuku thought. Evasion is passive. Domination is required. Izuku didn't dodge. He raised his hand. Open palm. One for all, 60%. Compression. He caught the fist. The shockwave was horizontal. It sliced the rain in half for a mile. The windows of the factory blew out. The ground beneath them cratered. But Izuku didn't budge. He stood rooted to the spot, his small hand stopping the charge of a villain who could topple mountains. Muscular's eye widened. What? Izuku looked up. The crimson lightning crackled violently, turning the rain around them into steam. Is that all? Izuku asked. It was a mirror of Shigaraki's question from Jaku. A cruel, logical reflection. Don't mock me. Muscular roared. He pumped more fibers into his arm. 12,000 layers. He pushed, trying to crush the boy. Izuku's eyes narrowed. Memory burn initiated. Source: Summer Camp. Koda's crying face. The memory flared in Izuku's mind, the fear, the desperation, the pain of his broken arms. The curse grabbed that memory, twisted it, and fed it into the furnace. The empathy for Muscular? Gone. The memory of saving Koda? Gone. Only the power remained. The crimson aura exploded. Danger senses silent, Izuku stated. Because you are not a danger. Izuku squeezed. There was a sickening wet crunch. Muscular screamed as the bones in his hand were pulverized inside his own muscle fibers. Izuku twisted his hips and threw. He didn't use a judo throw, he used brute force. He swung Muscular, a man weighing over 300 pounds, like a ragdoll, slamming him into the ground. Boom! Muscular bounced. Izuku was on him before he landed, a kick to the solar plexus. The armor of muscle fibers shattered. Muscular coughed up blood, his eyes rolling back. Wait! Muscular wheezed, realizing for the first time that this wasn't a fight. Wait, let's talk. I just want to fight. I don't want to die. Izuku stood over him. The black whip tendrils rose up like the heads of a hydra, poised to strike. You enjoy violence, Izuku said coldly. You enjoy inflicting pain. Yeah. That's who I am. Then you will understand, Izuku said. This is not pain. This is correction. Izuku raised his fist. The black whip wrapped around his arm, compressing, acting as a spring. F.A. Gene. 100%. He punched. He didn't aim for the head. That would kill. He aimed for the shoulder. The connection point of the muscle fibers. The impact sounded like a bomb going off. Muscular's right arm was separated from his body, not severed, but the bone was shattered so completely that the limb hung by threads of skin. Muscular passed out from the shock instantly. Izuku stood in the crater, breathing steam. The rain washed the blood from his gloves. Target neutralized. Permanent incapacitation likely. Izuku stared at the broken body. A flicker of the old Izuku tried to surface. Did I go too far? He's hurt bad. Necessary, the curse countered immediately. If he walks, he kills. If he crawls, he kills. Now, he will never kill again. The logic was sound. It was cold, harsh, and mathematically perfect. Izuku turned to leave. Young Midoriya! The shout came from the edge of the clearing. Izuku froze. He knew that voice. Even with the memories burning away, even with the curse eating his past, that voice was etched into the marrow of his bones. He turned slowly. All Might stood there. He was soaked, his skeletal frame trembling, his clothes plastered to his skin. He looked small. Fragile. Behind him, the lights of a police cruiser flashed blue and red. All Might took a step forward, his hand reaching out. Izuku. Please. Izuku looked at his mentor. The curse screamed weakness. Liability. Source of emotional compromise. Leave immediately. The boy whispered, Dad? Izuku's mask of apathy cracked for a millisecond. His lip quivered. The crimson aura flickered, revealing the green beneath. Don't look at me, Izuku rasped. He pulled the yellow cape tighter around his face. I am here. All Might shouted, tears mixing with the rain. I am here for you. You don't have to do this. You don't have to become a monster to defeat one. You don't understand, Izuku said. His voice was gaining strength, becoming harder again. The monster is already here. It's inside. He gestured to his own chest. I can't go back, All Might. I don't remember the way. We can help you find it. All Might pleaded. He took another step. Class A is waiting. Uraraka. Young Bakugo, they are waiting. At the mention of the names, Izuku flinched. Target Uraraka. Status, memory corrupted. Audio file missing. Target Bakugo. Status, memory fading. Visual clarity decreasing. I'm forgetting them, Izuku admitted, the horror bleeding into his tone. To fight. I have to forget them. If I come back, I'll hurt them. No! Stay away from me! Izuku screamed. The pressure released. A shockwave of pure intimidation rolled off him. All Might was forced to brace himself against the wind. I will finish this, Izuku vowed. I will kill all for one. And then I will rest. He crouched. Goodbye, All Might. Boom! Izuku launched himself into the air. He was faster than before. Within seconds he was just a red streak in the clouds, disappearing toward the neon glow of the distant city. All Might fell to his knees in the mud. He looked at the unconscious, mangled body of Muscular. He looked at the sky where his successor had vanished. I'm sorry, Toshinori sobbed into the wet earth. I'm so sorry, Nana. I broke him. Scene 5, Erosion. Later that night, high atop a gargoyle on a Gothic-style skyscraper in Tokyo, Izuku sat perched on the stone edge. The city below was a grid of darkness and sporadic fires. He was shivering. The adrenaline of the fight had faded. The curse had receded, satisfied with the correction of the threat. Now, there was only the cold. Izuku reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, charred object. It was a keychain. A small All Might figure. It had survived the battle, though the paint was chipped and the face was burned. He looked at it. He tried to remember where he got it. A store? A gift? He tried to remember the feeling of excitement he used to have when he looked at it. Nothing. It was just a piece of plastic. Izuku whispered to the wind. I am Izuku Midoriya. He repeated it, like a mantra. I am Izuku Midoriya. I want to save people. My favorite food is katsudon. He paused. What does katsudon taste like? He concentrated. He tried to summon the flavor of the pork, the egg, the rice. Blank. He knew the word salty. He knew the word savory. But the sensation? The memory of the taste on his tongue? Gone. Burned to feel the punch that broke Muscular's arm. A single tear leaked from his right eye. It didn't glow. It was just salty water. I am Izuku Midoriya, he whispered again, his voice breaking. I think. The rain continued to fall, washing away the city, washing away the boy, leaving only the phantom behind.